I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for coming. So we're going to talk about targeted advertising, which affects every single one of us, and I'm not sure how much we all know how much it affects us. But let's start with the fact there's only 3 ways in our lives to get content, to get television, to get print, to get content, and that you can steal it, and even people who steal it acknowledge it's not a very good business model. You can pay fees or subscriptions, or you can accept advertising, or some combination of the last 2. And we think most people prefer advertising to fees and subscriptions to get content. I did a little bit of work, and I don't know if you've ever plotted this out. I did a little bit of work about a year ago. I wanted to know how much money does the average American household spend on communication services that didn't exist a generation ago. So we're not talking about landline phones, which our parents and grandparents had, but how much does a household spend per month on mobile phones, on cable or satellite television, on broadband, on DVR charges, satellite radio, and this is an average. Anybody want to take a guess? 200, 400. Some people do spend 400 or more depending on their movie packages, their sports packages, but the average American household spends $267 a month on all these communication services that didn't exist when we were kids. The poorest Americans have cable or satellite television, and we saw in January of '09, at the height of the recession, we saw a number of people give up broadband to go back to dial-up so they could save $40 or so a month, and they were back on broadband within a matter of weeks. Because the internet we've gotten used to with YouTube and Netflix isn't possible in dial-up. So spending $267 as an average, and as I said, a lot of people do spend $400 or more, also depending on how many people are in the family and how many services you have. I don't think we're looking to spend more money on fees or subscriptions. I think we're going to look for most of our content to be supported by advertising. And historically, all the advertising that worked in our lives that we grew up with on television, that paid for all the network television we watch, isn't working as well as it used to anymore. We were curious. We did a little survey. We wanted to know, when a television commercial comes on, what percentage of the audience does what the advertiser pays the broadcaster for. In other words, what percentage of the audience watches the ad? Or put another way, what percentage doesn't go to the kitchen, go to the bathroom, change the channel, mute the set, scan if you have a DVR, get on the phone. So let me ask you, what percentage of the audience, when a commercial comes on, do you think is watching the commercial? Any guesses? It is indeed 10 to 15%. And it's actually a tiny bit higher than that, because some people are walking in and out of the room and may see a moment of it as they're leaving the room. But it's 10 to 15%. And advertisers are not going to continue to spend for shows, big successful shows like NCIS or Big Bang Theory. They're not going to spend $1 million a minute when only 10% of the audience is watching the show. And as you know, the highest rated show in American history is the Super Bowl, but that's an unusual situation, because that's the only program I can think of where people actually watch because of the commercials. And whether it's a good game or not is incidental. If it's a good game, even better, but people watch even if it's a bad game because it's commercial. And this problem with very few people watching television advertising didn't happen because of the internet. This has been happening for 40 years. The first thing that challenged television advertising was the remote control. When I was a kid, and for many of you, remote controls were options on television sets. Now you can't buy a television set without a remote, and if most of you, well, I think almost all of you, have those big flat panel television sets, they're almost impossible to control at the set. They don't want your grubby little hands all over their beautiful television sets. So the first thing that threatened television advertising was remote controls, which gave you a way to go somewhere else during the commercial. Then the next thing, long before the internet, was the rise of dozens and now hundreds of cable channels, which gave you all these new somewhere elses to go during the commercial. So now a commercial comes on, you may change the channel, you may never make it back to the program, or you may make it back after the program started. So television advertising has been threatened for a long time, and advertisers are now looking for a way that they can get you engaged. They don't care how many people are actually watching the show, because they know most of those people watching the show are on their phones, are in the kitchen, in the bathroom. They want audiences that are engaged. And this is where targetability comes from. A way to give advertisers information so they'll continue to put money into programming if they believe you're receiving those messages. There's a company I know that makes little chips that go into set-top boxes. And when a person first gets the set-top box, they can determine within 2 minutes whether the remote control is being operated by a man or a woman. Evidently, men poke the remote and hit it very hard and fast, and women, if they can ever get their hands on the remote, are much more graceful and elegant. So they can tell just by how quickly the buttons are pressed whether a man or a woman is watching within 2 minutes, within 48 hours, based on how the remote's used and what programs are watched. They can profile every member of the household. They can tell how many people live in the household, how many are male, how many are female. They can put them into a 10-year age group, and what they begin to do is sell advertising based on who is in the household. The actual fantasy, which is starting to come true, is there might be 4 people in the same household watching the same television program in 4 different rooms, each one receiving a different advertisement based on who they are. And this is what targeted advertising is. It's advertising that knows who you are. And targeted advertising, if done right, we're going to talk about all the privacy problems in a minute, which you're already, I'm sure, anticipating. But if done right, targeted advertising is a huge win for everybody. It's not necessarily going to be right. It's a huge win for the media owner, the person who owns the television channel, or the person who owns the internet website. It's a win for them because they can charge, and within television advertising, the unit of measure for how they sell advertising is, as some of you may know, a CPM, cost per thousand. Advertisers pay based on how many thousands of people are watching. There's a unit price per thousand. With targeted advertising, they can charge 10 times as much, or 1,000% premium, because they're saying to the advertiser, you only reach people you want to reach. The most famous quote in the history of advertising, it's a wonderful old quote, it's now become a cliche. It came from John Wanamaker of Wanamaker's Department Store in Philadelphia, which has been gone now for about 30 years. But John Wanamaker, the head of the department store, famously said, I know that half my advertising budget is wasted. I just don't know which half. And that's always been the problem with television advertising. If you're Toyota, who's back there, and you're selling ads on television, well, 80% of your audience isn't going to buy a car. Either they don't want a car, they just bought a car. Of the 20% who might be looking at a car, Half of them would never buy a Toyota for whatever reason. So when you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a 30-second ad, you're reaching people who are not potential customers. If you're selling diapers, Huggies, or Pampers, then you're paying to reach grandmothers and grandfathers, you're paying to reach parents who have grown-up children, you're paying to reach teenagers who don't have children. You're wasting lots of your money. If you're all of these products that only, if you're selling razor blades to men, then you're wasting money on all the women who are watching, although actually women buy the razor blades for the men, and you're wasting money on all the men who use electric razors. So advertisers will pay much, much more on a per thousand basis so that they can figure out which half of their budget is wasted and not spend that money. So it's a win for the, incidentally, that's how Google has become one of the richest companies in the history of the planet. Google says to advertisers, you don't pay anything to us until somebody demonstrates by what they search for that they're interested in your product. And when somebody starts searching for diapers or razor blades and then clicks, then they pay Google. But the only people that the advertiser has to pay Google for are the ones who have demonstrated that they're interested in that product. So it's a win for advertisers who pay more to reach each person, but they pay less overall because they only reach the people they want to reach. It's a win for the media owner who gets more money, and it's potentially a double win for the consumer. And the way, once again, we'll talk about the problems in a moment, the way the consumer wins with targeted advertising is, first, you get advertising that's much more engaging and relevant. It knows a little bit about you. It knows you're looking for a house, you're looking for a car, it knows you're looking for a computer, and therefore the advertising is more engaging. And secondly, it's a win for the consumer because it pays for content. It's a way to avoid subscriptions the same way you watch television all of your life until HBO and Netflix came along, which you had to pay for. It pays for content.